The morning the court letter arrived, Boston looked like it had pulled a heavy gray blanket over itself, the kind of sky that felt swollen with secrets and unspoken warnings, as if the city knew something I didn't. I woke to the metallic thud of the mailbox snapping shut, a sound I usually ignored because it only ever delivered reminders of how close I lived to the edge. Rent notices, student loan statements, shifts for my part-time marketing job taped together with desperation. But something in me stirred that morning, a strange pull I couldn't explain, almost like instinct telling me to get up, to look, to confront whatever waited for me before I had the chance to hide from it. My apartment was cold, the heater flickering like an aging heartbeat, and I shuffled into the hallway wearing last night's oversized sweatshirt, hair tied up in a messy bun that still smelled faintly of coffee from my late-night shift. When I opened the mailbox, my breath hitched. On top of the usual chaos sat a thick envelope embossed with the Massachusetts State Court seal. Official, heavy, intimidating, radiating the kind of purpose that didn't leave room for hope. My fingers hesitated before touching it, trembling slightly because deep down I already knew. Envelopes like this change lives. They don't come quietly, and they never come without taking something with them. At 26, I had learned to live with small betrayals. The subtle ones that don't break you all at once but instead hollow you out slowly over the years. My mother forgets my birthday unless someone reminds her. My father pretended my ambitions were childish fantasies while praising Claire, my older sister, for things she didn't even do. Claire was taking credit for my achievements, my designs, my late-night school projects, because in our house the spotlight was hers by default. I had swallowed these betrayals for years, convincing myself they were normal, convincing myself that being the overlooked daughter meant being the resilient one. But this envelope was different. This wasn't neglect or emotional favoritism. This was something heavier, something deliberate. I tore it open standing in my tiny kitchen, the smell of stale coffee lingering from the pot I never finished, and as the paper spilled out, a cold wave swept through my body. Notice of legal disclosure regarding estate documentation. Estate. The word didn't make sense. My parents had spent my entire childhood telling me we had nothing. We're barely surviving, my mom used to say as she tossed bills across the table dramatically. Don't expect anything from us, my father would add every time I hinted at plans. We don't own anything. You'll have to build your own life. I believed them. I believed every word. I worked 2 jobs in high school to save for community college while Claire floated through life like she had a guardian angel clearing every obstacle in her path. She got a brand new car at 16, her tuition paid, her apartment furnished, her mistakes erased. I convinced myself that maybe she deserved it. Maybe the universe just liked her more. But the court letter, cold, formal, undeniable, said otherwise. It sliced through the illusions I had clung to like a knife through paper. The second page hit me like a blow. A property under the Carter family name, our name. A 3-bedroom townhouse in Cambridge. Prime location. High value. A property I had never once heard mentioned. A property my parents had sworn never existed. And beneath my parents' signatures, both dated when I was 17, was a line that made my entire body go numb. Minor beneficiary, Amelia Carter. My name. My breath caught so sharply I almost choked on it. Beneficiary? Me? Since when? I blinked hard, thinking I had misread something. But the letters stayed exactly where they were. Black and unforgiving. That wasn't even the worst part. The letter stated that, as the listed minor beneficiary, now of legal age, I was entitled to a full financial disclosure because the property had been refinanced 3 times using my information. 3 times. My name. My social security number. My credit. My future. My hand tightened around the page until it crumpled slightly. I felt the room tilt around me. They didn't just hide a property, they used me. They used my identity without my knowledge, without my consent, without even the decency of pretending to care about what that would do to me. I thought of the years I spent being denied credit cards because my history was insufficient. I thought of the apartment applications rejected because my debt-to-income ratio was concerning, even though I had been careful, responsible, borderline obsessive about managing my finances. All those rejections. All those nights crying because I couldn't understand what was wrong with me. Why every door closed the moment I tried to open it. And now I knew. My own parents had locked those doors from the inside. I sank to the cold kitchen floor, leaning against the refrigerator as my heart pounded so loudly it felt like a threat pulsing inside my chest. Memories started connecting like constellations in a dark sky. The whispered conversations between my parents, the times Claire hinted that Mom and Dad had help, the occasional suspicious envelopes I wasn't allowed to open, the sudden tension whenever financial topics came up. It was all there. The truth had been around me the entire time, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. But what shattered me the most was the realization that they did all of this knowing I would struggle. They watched me drown financially while they used my name as a life raft. They watched me break and pretended not to notice. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages again, scanning for some mistake, some loophole that would make this a misunderstanding. But everything was clear, documented, legal, deliberate. They had chosen Claire's comfort and their convenience over my future. A burning rage began to rise inside me, slow but unstoppable, like lava cracking through years of suppressed hurt. My whole life I had played the role of the understanding daughter, the quiet one, the one who forgave without being asked, the one who believed love required sacrifice. But this wasn't a sacrifice. This was exploitation. This was betrayal disguised as parental duty. And I realized, sitting there on the kitchen floor surrounded by broken pieces of my past, that I wasn't obligated to protect them anymore. I wasn't obligated to remain silent. I wasn't obligated to be the one who fixed what they broke. Not this time. I stood up slowly, grabbed the papers with a grip that felt steadier than my heartbeat, and walked toward the door. The gray Boston morning greeted me with a sharp wind that slapped my cheeks awake, but it didn't stop me. Nothing could stop me anymore. I slipped into my coat, not even caring that I wore mismatched socks and hadn't brushed my hair. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the truth now sitting in my hands. A truth that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my childhood, my family, my identity. A truth that had waited 10 years to find me. I locked my door behind me, each click sounding like a vow. My parents had built their lives on the assumption that I would never question them. They underestimated me. They miscalculated my strength. And today the reckoning began. The truth had finally found me, and my revenge had just begun. My parents lived in a quiet suburb outside Boston, in one of those deceptively peaceful neighborhoods where the porches were always swept, the lawns were trimmed to perfection, and the neighbors waved like they weren't secretly cataloging every rumor they'd overheard in grocery store aisles. Driving up the street, I felt a tightness in my chest that wasn't fear but something heavier. An accumulation of years spent swallowing my own pain so the people inside that house could stay comfortable. Their white two-story home looked exactly as it always had. The flower boxes filled with seasonal colors my mother liked to boast about. The porch light hanging slightly crooked because my father refused to fix anything he didn't personally consider broken. But everything felt different now, tainted like I was seeing it through a lens that finally revealed what had always been there. An illusion built on lies. Claire's car was already in the driveway, shiny and spotless as if the universe had designed it exclusively to remind me of every time my parents couldn't afford basic things for me. Of course she was here. The golden child always managed to be exactly where she needed to be to keep her throne polished. I parked behind her, my hands gripping the wheel for a long moment as I tried to calm the storm inside me. But the calm never came. Not today. Today, anger steadied me like an anchor. I walked to the door without knocking, my boots crunching across the decorative gravel my mother insisted prevented messy footprints, and let myself inside. The smell of fresh cookies slapped me in the face immediately. A weaponized domesticity my mother used whenever she felt the need to perform perfect motherhood. She stood in the kitchen wearing her floral apron, transferring cookies into a tin with movements that were too precise, too rehearsed, like she had been practicing this role her whole life. "Amelia, you could have called first," she scolded, her tone bright but strained, wiping flour off her hands even though she knew she couldn't clean the guilt off that easily. I didn't bother responding. I pulled the court letter from my coat and slapped it onto the counter with a force that echoed through the room. Her face drained so fast it was almost impressive. She stared at the seal as if it were radioactive, and maybe it was radioactive truth, finally burning through the lies she'd hidden behind for years. My father entered a second later, holding his Sunday newspaper as he read it for intellectual stimulation instead of sports scores. The moment his eyes landed on the envelope, his jaw tightened. "We were going to tell you," he started. But the lie died halfway out of his mouth because even he knew it sounded pathetic. No, I cut in sharply, my voice harder than I'd ever allowed it to be. You were never going to tell me. The only reason I know anything is that the court forced transparency. Claire appeared in the doorway like she'd been waiting for her cue, arms crossed, posture dripping with the superiority she'd been fed since childhood. It's not a big deal, Amelia, she said, rolling her eyes as if I were overreacting about a spilled drink instead of identity fraud. Mom and Dad did what they had to do. You weren't financially stable and they used my name. I snapped before she could finish, my voice cracking under the weight of a decade's worth of betrayal. They refinanced a property under my identity. They forged my signature. They put debt on my credit. I struggled for years thinking we were broke while you... I pointed at her, my finger shaking, tears burning behind my eyes. Got everything handed to you. Claire's smirk vanished for the first time in her life, replaced by a flicker of discomfort she quickly masked. My father slammed his hand on the counter, the sound sharp and violent. That townhouse was for Claire's future, he barked. She needed stability. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. I stared at him, the man who taught me to always work harder, to earn everything, to never expect help. And here he was admitting they handed Claire the entire world while watching me drown. So you ruined mine for hers? I asked quietly, the tremble in my voice replaced by cold disbelief. My mother stepped forward, guilt etched into every line on her face. You were always the responsible one, she said softly, as if that explained everything. Claire wasn't. She needed more help. That sentence cracked something inside me so deeply I felt the fracture echo across memories. Every birthday Claire got a gift 10 times bigger than mine. Every time she crashed her car and my parents replaced it without hesitation. Every time I worked double shifts while she vacationed in Miami because she needed a break. I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. You didn't help her, I said, each word precise, sharp. You enabled her. You sacrificed me for her comfort. The kitchen fell silent. The clock on the wall ticked, loud and mocking. My mother looked away, unable to hold my gaze. Claire rolled her eyes again, but this time it looked forced. My father crossed his arms, his expression hard, stubbornness masquerading as authority. What do you want, Amelia? He asked, but this time his voice wasn't commanding. It was defensive, anxious. He wanted to regain control. He wanted me to fold like I always did. But the girl who used to fold had burned away the moment that court letter arrived. I straightened my back, feeling the shift inside me, an uncoiling of strength I had forgotten I possessed. I want the full financial disclosure, I said firmly. Every refinancing agreement, every signature, every document, and my legal share of the property. Claire scoffed loudly. You're so dramatic, she said, tossing her hair like she was still 17 and I was still the little sister who didn't know better. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice to a razor-thin whisper. And if you don't give it to me, I said, my eyes locked on hers, the court will. The words hit her like a slap. She blinked, momentarily stunned. My parents exchanged a look, one filled with fear, panic, and something else. The realization that they had finally lost their grip on me. And that terrified them. For the first time, I saw them not as parents but as people. Flawed, selfish, dangerously comfortable with betraying the daughter who never fought back. They had built a hierarchy where Claire floated effortlessly at the top, and I carried the weight of their poor decisions quietly beneath her. They expected the quiet daughter, the forgiving daughter, the daughter who swallowed pain and called it love. But that daughter no longer existed. I grabbed the letter off the counter, turned on my heel, and walked out of the house without another word. The cold air hit my face the moment I stepped outside, but it felt cleansing, almost invigorating. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what had just happened. My heartbeat was steady now, a rhythmic reminder of the fire burning in my chest. A fire they started but I would control. I reached my car and paused before opening the door, my breath fogging in front of me. For the first time in years I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. I felt awake. I had leverage. I had proof. And most importantly, I had a plan. And whether they were ready or not, my family was about to learn that the daughter they underestimated would become the woman who dismantled every lie they ever told. 2 weeks after the confrontation in my parents' kitchen, I found myself standing outside the Cambridge District Court, the cold Boston wind slicing through my coat like a warning, though nothing about today could shake me anymore. As I climbed the stone steps, I felt strangely steady, as if every betrayal and every lie had forged a new version of me, one that didn't tremble, didn't shrink, didn't apologize for existing. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Daniela Ruiz who looked like she dismantled 100 guilty families before breakfast, walked beside me with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the law was a sword and she wielded it like a weapon. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs, the kind that fill the air right before a storm breaks. My parents and Claire sat on the opposite bench, huddled together like a cluster of wilted flowers. My mother's eyes were red, my father's shoulders slumped, and Claire, perfect, polished Claire, looked rattled for the first time in her life, biting her lip so hard the gloss smudged. The sight should have hurt me, but it didn't. I felt nothing but a cool, unshakable calm that wrapped around me like armor. When the judge entered, everyone rose, and the sound of chairs scraping across the floor echoed through the room like the beginning of an ending. The judge wasted no time. He opened the file, flipping through the pages slowly, methodically, the way someone examines damage they know is not accidental. Each flip of a page made my mother flinch, made my father's jaw tighten, made Claire sink deeper into the bench. When he reached the refinancing agreements, complete with my forged signatures, he paused long enough that the silence pressed against us like a weight. "Ms. Carter," he said finally, addressing me with a respectful nod I wasn't used to receiving from anyone in my family, "were you aware that your identity was used for these agreements, including during the years in which you were a minor?" My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "No, Your Honor. I did not know of any property ownership or financial activity connected to my name. I only learned about it because of the mandatory disclosure notice." The judge nodded, his expression hardening. "This presents clear evidence of identity misuse, forgery, and financial exploitation of a minor." My father attempted to speak, something about family business and misunderstanding, but the judge silenced him with a single cold glare. "Mr. Carter, your turn to speak will come later. Right now, we are establishing facts." My parents sat frozen and Claire stared at the table, hands clasped tightly as though holding on to the last strands of the fantasy she'd been raised to believe, that she was untouchable, that she was the favorite, that everything in our family revolved around what she needed, not what she earned. The judge continued reviewing the evidence, each statement landing like a hammer. Unauthorized refinancing, misuse of credit, exploitation for financial advantage. With each word I felt lighter, as if the chains I didn't even realize I'd worn my entire life were breaking link by link. Finally, the judge leaned back in his chair, eyes stern. "Based on the documentation and testimony presented," he said, "Ms. Amelia Carter is legally entitled to full ownership compensation and damages for the misuse of her identity." Claire gasped so loudly it echoed across the room. My mother whimpered into her tissue. My father's face collapsed into the expression of a man who realized the consequences he thought he'd buried were now clawing their way to the surface. The judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he added, his voice sharp enough to cut, "Ms. Carter has the right to pursue criminal charges against all responsible parties." My family's heads turned toward me instantly, a mix of desperation, guilt, and fear swirling in their eyes. It was a moment I had imagined once, years ago, when I couldn't sleep because the world felt stacked against me. Seeing them forced to face consequences, seeing them stripped of the control they abused. But imagining it and living it were two different things. The courtroom felt cold, but inside me something warm and steady blossomed, a power I hadn't known I possessed. I let the silence stretch until their fear became palpable. "I won't pursue criminal charges," I said finally, watching relief flood their faces like a wave. And then, before they could breathe too deeply, I continued. "But the property must be sold. Immediately. And I want my full legal share transferred into my account within 30 days. The relief evaporated. Claire's voice cracked as she sputtered. "You can't do that. That townhouse was supposed to be yours." I cut in sharply. "Everything was always supposed to be yours. My entire life was twisted to serve your comfort. Not anymore." For once, Claire had no comeback. She stared at me, eyes glossy, as if she were seeing me for the first time, and not the version she could manipulate or dismiss. My lawyer nodded approvingly beside me, And the judge finalized the order with a decisive signature, the sound of the pen scratching across paper marking the official end of the narrative my family had written without my consent. As we left the courtroom, the cold Boston air felt different, cleaner, sharper, almost like freedom had a temperature. My parents lingered near the steps, waiting like they believed I owed them a final conversation, a moment of forgiveness they hadn't earned. My mother approached first, voice trembling. "Amelia, we're still family. You don't have to do all this." I turned to face her fully, and for the first time she looked small, not physically but morally, emotionally, spiritually. "Family doesn't steal futures," I said quietly. "Family doesn't lie to protect one child while sacrificing the other. Family doesn't watch you struggle when they're the reason you're drowning." Her lips trembled, but she had no defense left. My father tried next. "We made mistakes, but we did what we thought was best. For Claire," I finished coldly. "Always for Claire." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, stopping him. "I'm not responsible for the consequences of the choices you made. I'm done paying debts that aren't mine." He swallowed hard, realizing there was nothing left to say that would fix the damage he pretended didn't exist. I stepped back, reclaiming my space, my voice, my life. "Goodbye," I said. Not dramatically, not angrily, but with a clarity that felt like a clean cut, freeing me from everything that once held me down. I walked away without looking back. Each step felt like shedding a layer of weight I had carried for too long. When I reached my car, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't collapse. I simply exhaled, a deep cleansing breath that felt like the first real inhale of my adult life. Over the next few weeks, paperwork shuffled, lawyers processed the sale, and numbers I'd never imagined seeing in my bank account began rolling in. The day the transfer cleared, I sat in my tiny apartment and stared at the screen, not with greed or shock, but with a quiet, profound sense of justice. Not revenge. Justice. I used the money to sign a lease for a small apartment near Harvard Square. A cozy space with warm lighting, soft blankets, shelves filled with books I finally had time to read, and a balcony overlooking the heartbeat of the city. My first night there, I stood outside as the breeze brushed against my skin, the hum of Boston beneath me, and whispered to myself, the truth didn't break me. It rebuilt me. And it was true. My family regretted lying. They regretted underestimating me. And I stepped into the life they never wanted me to have, strong, unbroken, undeniable, and finally beautifully free.